in 1947. If you adjust that for inflation, it would be about $65,000.
And now it's worth.
The assessed value is a little over 400. So there's we have an affordability problem. And from as far as I know, rents happen to be a lot more expensive than they used to as well.
So how do we solve the affordability problem?
Because in all honesty, is that really a problem for you?
For me, as long as I'm staying where I'm at,
Kind of a net benefit, right?
not, well,
Higher property taxes.
there's, kind of yes and no. I mean, if you own a house and you aren't planning on moving, there's not really a downside. Now, if you need to move,
I guess I'm getting to part of the issue here, but for some people who have more houses, it's like they're trying to increase rent, they're trying to, make more money, and it's not as much a problem for people who own, right?
right, it's not as much of, it's, if you own and you bought, at a time when prices were lower, it's not a big problem. If you just got a job and you're trying to move to the area, and you either need to, you need to find a place to live. If you were considering buying a house, that is a
I'm
problem.
obviously not saying it's not a problem.
Mhm.
Part of the problem is the fact that some people are trying to, it's not the same problem for some reason.
I agree with you completely. Yes.
Also, in terms of, we can make this housing and homelessness, how many people are aware of what's called Housing First? This is an initiative begun in many cities, including Salt Lake City, in the middle of Utah, and some Canadian cities, where the response to homelessness is not plug them into all kinds of programs to change their behavior so that they will be able to earn enough to get a house. It's first give them a house or a residence, no strings attached, so that they now have the stability so that all those programs will work. And it has proven to be very effective, not just in terms of reducing recidivism rate, that is the percentage of people who go back to a homeless condition, but also it's more cost effective. In some places, it's like they've been able to cut the costs significantly, almost 90%. And it doesn't work for everyone, many people pointed out, but it works for such a large majority that then you can take the resources that are saved as a result and apply it to those more problematic parts of the homeless population who need more support from them.
Yeah, I've heard of some similar program. I don't remember what it's called.
It could be similar to labor party in the UK, where they're on a track to, their plan is to like 1 million houses, 1 million units.
I mean, so when something like 1/3 of all new luxury housing goes to people who actually live in the community, you're having people who are coming in, buying property that's sometimes $3 million on average, and then using that as an investment property that they may or may not rent out. And if they rent it out, it's going to be a $3 million house. Renting that out is going to be an awful lot of money. And so very few people are going to be able to afford that. So they either sit on it, so you've got the sunk cost of a property that isn't actually being used, or they rent it and it's really far too expensive for people to use. So I know in Somerville, one of the things they did is they've imposed it has to go through the legislature if I recall correctly, but it's a sales tax, but where seller pays half and the buyer pays half, but they only have to pay it if, or I should say, if you are a seller and you live in the house and you sell it to someone who isn't going to live in the house, then they're responsible for that tax. Whereas if I sell it to someone who's gonna live there, there's no tax. So in that way, that's kind of a transaction tax that encourages, that kind of that's specifically focused on people who are trying to either buy and flip, or people who are trying to buy for an investment vehicle.
So basically, it incentivizes keeping the housing available for local use.
Right.
I would have to say on the housing and homelessness as well, one of the things I would like to see is a psychological aspect to the homelessness, because I don't know about other people's towns, but in my town in Lowell, a lot of the people that end up on the streets are people who couldn't hold down a job because of various reasons, generally with them being able to process the work. One guy who I always end up giving money to, he gets me up at a traffic stop, but I always end up giving the money to him because I heard his story, and his story is a truly tragic story, where his psychological condition is he pushed everybody who's his support structure away. So in order to really help someone like that individual, having some part of this homeless, do that? No, you're fine, some part of the homeless situation is that lack of structure to help support them. So having a way, an outlet or a psychological benefits in order to help like clinicians and therapists get over the tough times. Because from what I understand, about 80 to 90% of actual clinical psychology isn't because you're crazy, but is because your mental stability in a particular sense is weakened at one point, and your life is so stressful that it exaggerates that particular weak point. And a lot of the times, it's an actual life event that's truly tragic, and just having that outlet helps them get over that, helps them reel themselves back in. So
How would you summarize that?
oh, for the cliff notes are up there.
Yeah.
So how I would summarize that is mental health wellness programs for those in need. And a good example of that, the mental health wellness programs is what they do for veterans coming back. A very similar program where they have support groups and programs for those who are homeless, for homeless and veterans.
Well, do we want to limit it to just, I could see youth
Yeah,
needing, there's a whole collection of people that are not just homeless.
yeah,
True.
sure,
Or veterans, so,
true.
Refugees
for those who need it.
Yep. An open community mental health wellness.
Sorry, so how did you add, what further should I take?
Community-based.
Oh,
Community-based mental health and wellness programs. Instead of just being sponsored by like a hospital or an insurance carrier, they actually have it based off of community and off of the actual wellness of those individuals in the community, by the community, for the community.
Obviously on here, a big one for me, just kind of in that discussion is, I know, I don't know how to say this, but, when it comes to a lot of these wellness programs and a lot of these programs, even with the criminalization of marijuana, I'm not too sure how it all feeds into eligibility for these programs. So I guess just looking at marijuana as a possible solution or part of someone's recovery, and not something that should be fun, take them away. I haven't looked at too much into this as of recently, after decriminalization, but people not being eligible for wellness programs or mental health or whatever because of drug use. What I'm getting at, right?
Yeah, I mean,
It's a controversial subject.
Honestly, with the mental health wellness group, it wouldn't even matter what your citizen status is to be accepted into a program like that. As you were saying, sir. So, I mean, if you're a refugee escaping, say, some terrible life event, and you need a support group, and there's no one else to have open support groups
But I don't know,
for.
this is just something Stephen Mandel's been, as a veteran, marijuana is not an option for him, they're giving opioids, and because of his marijuana use, he's not eligible for certain benefits, and they definitely don't.
Well, also, they try very hard with, and bringing it back to the housing issue, that there are a lot of
Especially,
housing, programs that require drug testing. And, you know, it seems like kind of counterintuitive that, the people who most need housing may also use drugs, and what they're.
so maybe do something on marijuana, continue to end the destigmatization of marijuana, and, decriminalization, continue to support the legalization of marijuana here in Massachusetts, but also view marijuana as part of the answer for some people.
Or even to expand on that, victimless crimes,
Yeah.
and really just trying to put the kibosh on victimless crimes.
Right.
Crimes where you don't really hurt anybody else. Facilitating a way for them to either get better or do it in a way that is safe for them and all those.
I just feel like a major part of this issue is still the drug war, and someone's using drugs, they're a loser, and they don't deserve any support and benefits, and it's very similar to the sex trafficking, the stigma, sensual sex. But I still think that's a major issue, when it comes to housing and social programs, is drug testing, drug use. And I can understand if someone's doing dope and has a real big dope problem, dope being heroin, that it's hard to justify state funds going to someone who's probably more likely than not provide much to society.
well, but I mean, I remember in the eighties, right, there was this segment on 60 Minutes where in Switzerland, and it may have changed, but literally there were people who were addicted to opiates. And, before this program, they'd go and they live on the street, or they'd steal, or they had, they were estranged from their family. And so what they did was they had a program where you came in the morning, you had your shot of whatever the opiate is. That evened them out, and then they could go off and be functioning members of society. And I don't think our policy should be to encourage people to be addicted, but at the same time, we need to treat it like a medical issue.
It's a public health issue, not
Focus.
a crime.
Yeah, focus should be on productivity, not like.
That's the philosophy of harm reduction, is you follow the policies that lead to
That's exactly what.
reduction of harm, reduction of suffering, and enable the person to get to a state where, they're a contributing member of society. And, there are people who are, high functioning addicts. Do we arrest them and convict them and stigmatize them because of it, or do we recognize that they can function that way? Let's stop, moralizing about it, and make sure that they can at least, deal with that safely as possible.
And be eligible for all social programs, and
Exactly.
it's a very controversial issue. Plenty of friends who don't understand how we can fund people putting needles in their arms, but they don't get the help, so we end up dead. It's not just.
Well, I think a big
It's
part
about
of it,
productivity.
focus needs to be on productivity.
I think a big part of that whole conversation really just goes down to the fundamental question of what point do you draw the line? And it's such a fine line that's really hard to draw. But I always took the stance that people who are addicted to such things, they have a sickness versus saying it's something, like once you open the door to that particular Pandora's box, some doors are really, really hard to close. And I've known somebody who was a recovering addict, and he kept on going back to it, not because the issues he was facing was because he wanted to do it. No, he had kids, he wanted to be there to support his kids, but it was really just that it's such a strong pull that once it gets in your brain, there's a chemical change that happens that makes you really want to go for it. And you could always tell when he was getting the itch because he would start talking about it a lot, because you could tell it was on his brain. And that's when we always knew he was about to slip. So it's more of a disease than something that is anything he was doing wrong. One of the hardest working guys I've ever met in my life. One of the straight up honest guys, and he was completely honest. And as soon as, whenever he did slip, he would tell everybody he would go get help. He's an amazing guy. But he does have a problem. And so I want to keep the pathway for someone who understands their own weaknesses and wants to do right by the community and right by those around them, to keep those pathways open. Versus just slamming the door and saying, oh, well, he's just a user, goodbye. That's not how I would feel comfortable moving
Or
forward.
you're not eligible for X.
You're not eligible to get food for your kid or keep a roof over their head. That's not, doesn't seem right.
Fund the MBTA, yes.
The state of Mass doesn't drug test for housing.
What?
Please tell me, this is, that the line you copy pasted just now?
That I moved?
Yeah. So
Well, I
that's-
just said drug for housing, for governments, for government services.
Some
For
housing
government programs.
programs
Is it,
do.
does that exist?
Yeah.
Something
And that's,
Yeah, probably.
I mean,
I mean,
Like
you
some
would
people-
probably be more of the expert.
Some,
yeah.
there's different programs, and I know the majority of the programs do.
so, I mean,
I don't know, I don't know, honestly, and I feel kind of
like housing.
stupid saying this,
or-
but I don't know under the under the legalization laws, how that's changed.
There's like clean halfway houses or, I don't know what the right term is. But if you want.
Well, I know for section 8 that
Sober
there's some,
houses.
there's sober houses
So-
obviously drug tested.
Yeah.
And places like that, but if you're gonna be getting state funding or federal funding to be living somewhere, then they absolutely, it's almost like if you have, like I have a job where I work for the state, they still drug test me, right? If I show positive for marijuana, I'm gone.
It just strikes me as odd, like,
So if there's any federal
we should
funds
just start drug
involved,
testing the police, the bankers.
a lot of people are saying that.
I mean,
The
for a whole host of
our
things.
congressmen and women, right? I mean,
Actually, they do test the police on a regular basis. They also test any first responders.
if any federal funds are involved in any project, they're gonna be drug tested. I know that for sure. I don't know about if it's only state funds. I need to look into how that's been affected by the legalization law. I would hope if the state's funding something and it's been voted legal that they'll want everything to be part of the drug test. But I need to look into that. But if there are any federal funds involved in any program, be 0.01% federally funded, federal government should require. Whatever's involved in it. Which most state programs are usually somewhat partially backed by federal funds.
It's just the pike and the Tobin Bridge that I told you.
The tunnels.
But those are, oh, yeah, the Callahan Tunnel, yeah.
Route 1.
Yeah, that's a Tobin Bridge.
Yeah. Or if they're gonna keep it, at least charge the people who are out of state.
I don't know, well, I'm not sure quite how you, well, it's, yeah, they take pictures of license plates so they can.
But if you're out of state, you don't get hit with it.
Yeah, but even so, I mean, it's a,
They're supposed to, but they don't.
they have records, right? I mean, they have records of where you went, and do we really want that as a society, knowing that you drove this portion of the pike?
Also, I mean, the toll devices, I don't know if but in theory, they also use for traffic management and other stuff where they do more tracking than just at the toll stations.
Big pirate issue is, that I wanna bring up right now, and make sure it stays a big pirate issue, is personal data and security. I don't know if we got that up there, but like Facebook, Twitter, where they caught, how many times has Facebook been caught selling our information? You know,
Facebook just had a really amusing comedy of software defects that,
defect.
yeah, that led to a security breach. I suspect that the 50 million number will increase over time.
So, I mean,
So it's related to like two-factor authentication, they're using it as like two-factor.
oh yeah, they were texting, they were texting people,
They use
yeah.
that for ad targeting, yeah.
But I'm thinking, we have these, and Steve has done some research on this, we have, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, they gather these databases on us, right? But they're not the only ones who gather databases on us. And so, how do we see that anyone who gathers a database has to provide ways of cleaning up that database? I mean, Amazon, I'm sure, has a huge database on many people. So, I mean, how do we bring that stuff more into
Responsible
line?
disposal of information no longer relevant is actually, I would say like, I mean, you're gonna
Starting
collect
at-
information on your customers, but what if, how do you dispose of that information? We're incorporating laws to dispose of that information when you're done processing it. Because you don't need my credit card information, Amazon, for the next 20 years. I've had 20 credit cards, all from the same bank account, but all different ones. When you go onto Amazon, there's like 20 different cards there listed, you can't get rid of them. That's a bad example, but, because you can't get rid of them, but.
Yeah, you could apply it to.
But that information is still always in their database. And there should be a protocol or a government protocol that allows or regulates so that there's no more breaches like the Equifax hack.
So this is obviously like very major privacy regulation in Europe that just like recently was
GDPR.
and a lot of American companies actually were affected by this and have implemented those sorts of controls on top in terms of customer data and how long they retain them and have to actually review their internal processes and provide documentations to customers about how the data is used and how long it's retained and what kinds of data specifically. And that sort of thing, I mean, I have some issues with the law as it was implemented, but the spirit of that regulation at least is similar to what you brought up. So, and the other thing is that a lot of American companies are multinational companies and they've already implemented these sorts of restrictions, but only for the European customers because American law is required.
Don't require it, and hashtag not all companies are doing this.
Right.
Or like you said, some companies are doing this where they're forced to do it, but then don't bother with anyplace else. And so what I would like to see is an implementation of and we're talking about bare minimum implementations of what should be done for the proper data disposal.
So if you take license plate recognition, what I don't understand is how departments are selling information they collect.
Well, they might not necessarily sell them, they could get hacked. Like, for example, the big Sony hack. When Sony got hacked and had millions of people's information, just social security numbers, just out beyond it.
I mean, I look at it as is this topic concern private companies, like internet companies that hold on to customer data, they're supposed to be a finite number of months or a year or something, or government? I mean, what if we turned around and said, oh, let me just put this out there, if all the license plate data that goes in the pipe, is gonna be, transparently put onto some website, so you can see the daily license plates coming and going. I'm just asking, like, is that surveillance now, or is it transparent? Is it privacy?
That would be a privacy breach, because there are ways to look up people's information based off of their license plate number. And there are all sorts of different ways, like private eye and private investigators can start looking and doing searches that way.
Yeah.
And that's basically like putting up a camera in town square and then making it public access, which would defeat the purpose of people who are using it for criminal intent to use it for criminal intent. That's making it easier for the criminals to have access to that information.
I apply it to, like, even the cameras, just surveillance cameras in general, is if they were all accessible to the internet.
They are.
Right? I hope, I mean, there's always a story about, like, if someone important with power gets into an accident or a hit and run or something, right? And, there's no tape, there's no evidence of it on video, even though there's supposed to be cameras on that stretch of highway or on that section of town or city. So I don't know, I'm just concerned about accountability of the data that's being collected and transparency.
Well, again, I do understand what you're saying on that particular issue. My concern is where I'd rather see the information disposed of than being made available to the public, especially when it comes to, it falls more into the protecting the rights and privacy of the individual versus the government's official business. And now, if it was an official, like, police action or action by the state, then I want to have access to that knowledge. And, okay, this incident happened, this is what happened, here's a camera, here's what this person said, that patient said, versus.
These are like movements of private officials, not their actions with the state or actions done by, entities.
I mean, I'm not one really for public shaming, and so if you have license plates that didn't pay, like, some people would have to follow that, oh, if they didn't pay their taxes, here's their license plate, but I'd rather not, I'm not really for the scarlet letter, when people's private business is their private business.
You also don't know why they're not paying a particular tax or something, there may be circumstances you don't know about. It's better to sit down with them and say, okay, what is the reason you're not paying, and if there's a way to work it out. Like, the IRS isn't one of the greatest agencies in the world, but a friend of mine recently, he had a problem where a debt was forgiven, so it hiked up his tax bill. He was able to negotiate a payment plan, and he actually paid it off early, and was able to do that because that was the place. You should have the same across the board, that if you have a problem with paying your taxes, instead of, as you said, shaming, putting a scarlet letter, have a circumstance where you can sit down, talk about, and come up with a way of dealing with it effectively for both parties.
Yeah, conflict resolution, especially when it comes to even government. But yeah.
So how would we characterize that?
Oh, how would you put that? Data privacy, protecting the privacy of the individual, not the state.
I mean, I think it's useful to look at what's in GDPR and more extensively and put that into our own platform.
Rather
But I mean, one of the things I know is there's now a right to be forgotten, which got enshrined. And that's actually been used here, where there was some guy from Europe who was sued and lost, and he's like, oh, GDPR, you have to go, right to be forgotten, you have to go and remove that. It's like, no, that's a public record, you can't remove that.
So, yeah, the kind of abuse of that, similar to the abuse of copyright.
Right.
As a way to take down speech
One of the exercises we did as a pilot party this last year was we assembled, it was in the Commons, and we were looking through and like looking at different areas to see what the camera systems are. What was that system?
You mean our cctv.masspirates.gov?
Yes, that.
.org.
Sorry, .org.
Email.
No internet?
It's working.
It's trying really hard.
So this was a project we ended up doing this year too. Was it this year or was it last year?
Last year, we haven't done as much since, I know the iPhone app that I use so much is no longer working. Unfortunately, I haven't heard back from the maker of it to update it.
So this is one of the things that we were doing. It kind of fell by the wayside. But it was a legitimate thing, and so if you actually zone in on a particular spot, you can actually go in and add that you see that are just, so that if you want to know how many cameras are on that block and stuff like that. And it's still going live and everything, so you can actually zone in, there's a little, if there's a specific spot you go onto, it shows you all the cameras, and as it, because it's open source, you can go in and if there's a new camera there, you can actually cameras too as well. So it's a cooperative.
Yeah, it's done through OpenStreetMap data. So all we're doing is pulling in the data. Like every time there's I think it's every hour, we pull down what's changed in OpenStreetMap, looking specifically for the information on cameras, stick it into a database, and then render it here.
So it's, yeah, so OpenStreetMap is the canonical source of this information.
Correct.
Now.
Yeah.
And that is, and they're getting that from community, like crowdsourcing basically.
Yeah. So if we zoom out, you'll see there's a lot more in, say, Europe.
There's a lot of water there.
Not a lot of there. Clearly did not zoom out far enough. So like clearly Europe is in better shape than we are in terms of mapping. Although I'm just kind of amazed that the United Kingdom has, what, 40,000 cameras? And only, 1,300 of them have been mapped.
Well, that's all in one block in London, right?
Yeah, probably. Probably.
So some areas are more mapped out than others.
I noticed it looks like Monaco has a hell of a lot. I don't know if that's Monaco or another city.
What, down here?
I have heard that Monaco has so like
France.
a huge, it's like virtually every square inch is covered by canvas.
Anyway, so someone dutifully mapped out most of the White House. What they didn't hide it. I think the guys from Germany.
Because they was-
Anyway, so yeah, this was one of our other
White House or
projects.
around the White House?
Or, I don't know about in the White House. These are all exterior cameras. But,
And again, this was just in trying to keep the government transparent. This was definitely a government transparency project, at least as far as I understood it. And it was just trying to see where, eventually, if I'm looking at the abyss looks back. Well, we're looking back and looking at who's trying to watch us and trying to see where all these cameras are. It's a lot of 15 in the park.
There we go.
yeah, I mean, I was down there over a year ago, and every single light post had 2 along this stretch of road. So, it was a lot.
And you know what, isn't that the stretch of road where protests go down?
Yeah, exactly.
And the real question is, when they're taking all of this video and all this footage of us with all this data, what are they doing with that data? You know, what are these private companies holding that data? Are they public are they public trusts like government agencies and stuff like that? Who's collecting this data? Who's maintaining this data?
What is access?
Who has access to it? Actually, one of the things that me and Steve were discussing when I first signed up for the Pirate Party was a company that has some issues with the way they collect data and the way they manage data. And Steve was like, why don't we just protest them? You know? So, again, I think a better path for us would be to limit what they do with that data and how they deal with that data, and put in the regulations on how that data is manipulated, how long they can hold on to stuff like that, without the express written consent of those that they're recording, which is almost impossible to do over a long enough time frame. You know?
We're all on some of those cameras somewhere.
Yeah.
That'll be awesome.
Take this our walk on the concrete.
Exactly, and where's that information?
Who has access to?
Who knows where Gary is?
I guess that's more, it's like kind of accountability for, collection and like access and storage data.
I mean, the tough thing is, I'm sure we all well aware that, the counter argument, stop crime or whatnot, right?
But there's no evidence that
Right,
it
yeah, no,
does.
that's your, yeah.
Well,
Steve has done that.
Actually, there's evidence that the presence of cameras can make a statistically significant reduction for a very specific set of crimes. So things like pickpocketing, purse snatching, taking something out of your car. It won't do, but for crimes involving like aggression, abduction, drug dealing, stealing cars. You know, there's no statistical correlation, or there's not a statistical difference there's not a statistical difference in crime reduction. Sometimes it can go up, sometimes it goes down, sometimes it stays the same.
Sometimes people find ways to thwart. certain
Yeah,
mistakes.
which is, and I mean, even sometimes, yes, people, where cameras have been used, a couple of the things that, can accompany, like a camera rollout are displacement. So if there's a camera there, well, whatever was going on in that block moves a block away where there wasn't a camera. People expect the cameras to act as witnesses, silent witnesses, so you have fewer witnesses coming forward to report crimes. Or even some of the, there are also some bad deployment mistakes. where like, for example, in one case where pan, zoom, and tilt camera is deployed just on auto pan. So people learn that, well.
I'll pick someone's pocket when the camera's turned the other way.
Yeah, so there's, people are creative and they will have creative responses. We'll say that.
So I see you brought up a new topic, the economy.
One that affects us all.
Where did it begin?
Well, I mean, I would certainly say ending, and I'm reluctant to use the term corporate welfare, but ending corporate subsidies. You know, I gave the example of, I think last year we gave $15 million to Siemens. We don't know how much will be given to Amazon HQ2. You know, there's money given to Hollywood or Hollywood Industries in order to do some of their work here. And of course, Hollywood, and it isn't even as bad that we're giving them a tax break, but Hollywood never makes any money, and so, you know, at least on an accounting basis, and so they just take that and sell it at a discount. So not only are we're not charging them taxes on the work they do here, but we're also not, that tax break they get then goes to lower someone else's tax break. So we're losing twice. So I mean, ending corporate subsidies would be.
Also, the big thing that was argued in terms of all these tax breaks to corporations and to the top income earners is they're arguing, oh, it will lead to creation of jobs. It hasn't. Right. So maybe, you know, end corporate subsidies is people first, semicolon, end corporate subsidies.
It was Cambridge, Cambridge allowed Facebook to build their offices or a building here. They moved some offices or I don't know, headquarters or anything. Long story short, they did it, they got the break, and they have 4 workers in the Cambridge office or something, and they got millions of dollars.
Who is this?
Well, unless they're paying those 4 workers like $5 million a year.
I mean, you know.
Well, I mean, Amazon opened, what, a tech office, and they're like, oh, we're gonna have 2,000 new jobs. And I forget how many millions of dollars they got for that. What I find funny though, and I'll, so I think there's a bias towards companies that come from outside. So I'll give an example. So in the same approval process where Siemens was given $15 million to open a factory here, my employer was given $1,000 for each new employee it hired, up to $750,000. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't think my employer should have gotten that $1,000 or that $1,000 an employee. But it's just interesting to me that you have an employer that's here, wants to stay here, they're given a maximum of $750,000, but someone else from outside, they get lots of money. It's, you know, well, it's not really fostering local businesses now, is it?
I have
Yeah.
a thought, and Jamie being the economist in the room, better for worse, I think it would be very nice to have a system of measuring the economy that didn't emphasize the stock market so much. So I don't think that's, you know, I think that measure by itself misses a lot.
You know, like look at both number of people employed and median income versus cost of things like rent, food, etc.
Well, some of those things can be done, but it's also, we have an accounting system that, so if we fund, trying to think of something that has negative, as they say, externalities, but, you know, we view the cleanup of hazardous waste as a net benefit to the economy. But really, the hazardous waste is a net cost to the economy. We're trying to get back to what we had before, right? When we didn't pollute. And so our whole accounting principle, having a real people's budget with honest accounting that reflects the true costs and benefits that people have.
Honest accounting reflecting the real benefits and negative impacts people have. Of the Commonwealth, maybe?
So, sorry, how are you going to improve this?
Just like that, all the way up to, and just replace human activity with the Commonwealth.
Yep.
Sorry, the Massachusetts,
Well, Commonwealth also includes more than just people. Includes our physical environment.
the environment, the people, the lands, the animal, the Commonwealth.
There's also kind of goes towards housing, where developers are putting up high rises and they say, oh, we give out X% to first time buyers or to.
Or build some fraction of affordable housing, and that's part of this development.
I mean, that's gotta increase.
Yeah.
You know, I like the idea of the first time buyer, which is, yeah, have a $1.5 million home for a $10,000 down payment, and, but the city or the town.
Party like it's 2008, I'm sorry.
And, yeah,
Housing, I guess, like also, yeah, renter rights and like, just whatever.
Such as?
Better, I guess, like, Manchester Jelly has been a bit of stuff, but, having, I guess, a recourse for renters who have, like, rights, basically, but, it's probably a better way.
The stove doesn't work and your landlord won't fix it.
Yeah.
But aren't there, I think, but that's already an issue, right? You can,
There's already laws about.
I think there's already laws in regards to that.
You're allowed to hold your rent check until, if it's a major problem with the residency, such as your stove not working, or you don't have heat, you're allowed to withhold payment until such things are done. And you're supposed to put it into an escrow. Real estate law. But there are certain things like in the improvement of the rights for those who are disadvantaged, and putting in place possibly something for people who don't know their rights, so that they can easily gain access to knowing their rights under housing law would definitely make sense.
Does that cover it?
About their rights and obligations.
Fine. How about to renters and owners? About their rights and obligations? Right.
Well spoken, sir.
Although I would think the owners probably know they have a higher incentive to.
Yeah, that's a rest bag.
Yeah.
But they, you know, I don't see any harm in letting the owners know what their obligations are.
Yes, agreed, agreed.
Is there any way we can add another one up there?
Go for it, whatever.
Uh,
People see, I see, personally, I see these as a stepping board. We have to flesh them out into actual proposals.
right to repair.
Do you see that as under housing and homelessness, or
No, I
is
see
that?
it as an own new topic.
Oh, no, agreed. Well, yeah, I mean,
We've kind of been bouncing around all over the place anyways. Well, because I've had too much coffee. Sorry. Well, I kind of feel it's on my screen, I own it. You know, some of the original ways of the internet, once you download it, I mean, back in the day when it took me half an hour to download that picture of that lady online, you know, that was mine.
well, conversely for that, at least in relation to housing, owning of cars, you know, it's one thing to say, okay, you missed 3 payments and so now we're gonna repossess your car. It's another thing to, you're driving down the road, you missed 3 payments and they turn your car off.
Yeah, well, that's also a public safety issue.
But that doesn't mean they won't do it. And they can have GPS like, oh, you're on some small little road, we can turn you off here.
Or we're going to make it pull over to the side of the road and then turn it off.
There's that too, yes, yeah.
Something you probably can use as a way of living.
Especially for low income people.
But I mean, that's a case where, you know, if you're renting the car, if you're like leasing the car, or if you're a renter, you know, there are legal proceedings that you have to go through, legal hoops that you have to go through to gain repossession of something. We don't want it to be that code is law, and now they can just do it without having gone through the legal process.
Or making sure that we, sorry.
I was going to say like I could easily see an autonomous vehicle having a drive yourself back to the lot.
Don't get me wrong, I love an autonomous vehicle. I can install an easy bake oven, be making myself breakfast on the way to work. But
You'd also have finally country western songs where the singer laments his pickup truck leaving him.
Write it, dude, write
oh
it.
god, it's not too soon anymore.
My Chevy Ram left my home today.
That would be a good pirate party ad, actually.
Oh.
There is some country and western.
But falling under right of repair, I feel that once you've spent the time, you spent the internet resources, the money for the internet, the time to download it or time to acquire such things that become onto your hard drive essentially should be yours. I don't know if there are some fine details that maybe you could rent certain programs that you use on your PC, like Adobe does. They're like, yeah, you can use this for free. If you need to go deeper, then you rent this different service from us. But as far as it being on my computer, once that PDF is on my computer, that PDF belongs to me, or at least that copy of it, because it's taking up space on my hard drive. So once it's on my computer and I want to open it up or look at the source code, or if I want to F12 that web page and say, oh, that's a good bit of writing of software, and take that software and implement it into my own coding, it should be my right to write it up as I see fit.
Basically, I guess like ignoring how something might have gotten on your computer, but the fact that it is on your computer and it is your basically it is data, it's your own hardware that you're interacting with. So you should be able to do what you want with your own hardware, basically.
so long as it does not, so one of my
Doesn't
fundamental.
infringe on someone else's.
Yeah, one of my fundamental principles personally is that one, you're free to do whatever you want to do, so long as it doesn't infringe on anyone other's rights. And, one of my personal codes of my ways. So long as, if I mess with the software and I don't bug it out so much that it crashes the entire system, I should be able to bend that system to my own needs and wants, as I see fit. So long as I don't change the software to the point where it hurts the original maker or causes financial loss for the original maker or any of the other users, I should have the right to do that.
Or rather that the other effects are kind of incidental to this particular action. Like the general things that you should not be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if I wanted to go and take that game of Call of Duty 2 and make it so that when I'm playing with my friends, we could just have constant AC-130s, it doesn't hurt anyone. I'm using a game example because I live in a gamer's world.
It's the same with the hardware of the console that you, or that PC.
Or if I have a Raspberry Pi and I want to use it to watch some of my favorite movies online, and make a little Raspberry Pi so I use it for an HDMI cable attached to it to watch movies to my TV. I should be allowed to put on whatever source code that I want onto.
It shouldn't be a felony to modify your Xbox or your PlayStation.
Exactly.
Like,
I'm not renting my-
or your tractor, or,
Yeah, I didn't pay $600 to rent an Xbox. I paid $600 to own an Xbox.
I paid
So-
$4 to own the song, not to listen to it.
Or,
You know,
yeah.
The rights to.
Well,
you own.
Actually, there's it's an interesting twist in copyright cases where, or in the way copyright.
Steve, is there any way I can put this forward so you can just keep an eye on it?
I'm sorry.
I'm just gonna put this forward so you can keep an eye on it.
Okay.
So I lost it about an hour in.
No, I specifically did that because I didn't want to show another document. I just wanted to put stuff in from that. I'll put it back up and we can discuss it.
Oh, no, it's fine. All right, and we're just taking a quick break, and we will be back.